Love doesn't end with a scream. It ends with a phone call meant for someone else. The woman on the line had a voice like honey, professional and warm, the kind of voice that makes you trust what comes next. She said, "Hi, this is Serena from Azure Day Spa calling to confirm your couple's massage for Saturday at 2. We just wanted to thank you for rescheduling under the names James and Emily." There was a pause. Music played faintly behind her words, something with flutes. "Is this still a good number to reach you?" I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear, watching steam rise from the kettle I'd forgotten to turn off. The afternoon light came through the window at that angle that makes dust visible, each particle suspended and slow. I could hear my own breath. I could hear the clock above the stove, the one with the blue face that James bought at a flea market in Vermont during our second year together, ticking forward like it always did, indifferent and constant. "I'm sorry," I said. "Who?" "James and Emily," she repeated, still warm, still certain. "The appointment is under your husband's credit card. We have it scheduled for Saturday, February 10th at 2 p.m. Should I keep that time, or would you like to adjust?" I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her my name was Sarah, that I'd been Sarah for 34 years. Sarah when we met at that party where someone spilled wine on the carpet. Sarah when he proposed on a bridge in the rain. Sarah for a decade of mortgage payments and grocery lists and nights when he fell asleep with his hand on my hip. I just said, "Thank you, that time works," and hung up before she could say anything else. The kettle screamed. I turned it off. The kitchen went quiet again, and I stood there holding my phone like evidence I didn't yet know how to read. This isn't fiction. This is how love disappears, one small truth at a time. We'd been married 10 years that February. Not the kind of 10 years you see in commercials, where everything gleams and passion renews itself like subscription services, but the real kind. The kind built on shared silence and knowing how someone takes their coffee and the mutual agreement to ignore certain things because naming them would require change. James worked in data analysis. He left the house at 7:45 each morning, kissed my forehead without looking at me, and came home at 6:30 smelling like the sandalwood soap they kept in the office bathrooms. We had routines. Tuesday was trash night. Fridays we ordered Thai food and watched whatever was new on streaming. Sunday mornings I made pancakes while he read articles on his phone, and sometimes he'd read a sentence aloud, and I'd make a sound that meant I was listening, even when I wasn't. Our house was a split level in a neighborhood where people waved from driveways and complained about the school district, even though none of us had school-aged children yet. The kitchen cabinets were white. The couch was gray. We had a coffee table book about Iceland that no one had ever opened. On the mantel sat our wedding photo, both of us younger, thinner, laughing at something the photographer said that neither of us could remember now. I worked from home 3 days a week, doing copywriting for a firm that sold software I didn't understand. My office was the second bedroom, the one we'd promised ourselves would become a nursery someday, though someday kept getting quieter. I'd sit at my desk and hear James moving through the house below me, the refrigerator opening, his footsteps on the stairs, the low murmur of a phone call I assumed was work. We were fine. That's what I would have said if anyone asked. We were fine. My birthday was on February 8th. James had mentioned the massage 3 weeks earlier, casually, while we were loading the dishwasher after dinner. "I booked something for your birthday," he'd said. "A couple's massage at that place you mentioned." I'd mentioned it once, months before, after my friend Rachel came back from a spa weekend glowing like she'd discovered religion. "Azure Day Spa," she'd said. "Expensive, but worth it." I'd looked it up online, scrolled through photos of stone walls and essential oil diffusers, then closed the tab because we didn't do things like that. We were practical people. We had a mortgage. "You didn't have to," I had said, but I was smiling. It felt like proof of something, that he'd been listening, that he remembered, that underneath the routine there was still intention. "It's your birthday," he'd said, closing the dishwasher. "You deserve it." I'd hugged him then, pressing my face against his shoulder, breathing in laundry detergent and the faint salt of his skin. He'd patted my back twice, his version of affection when his hands were wet, and that was that. I didn't think about it again until the phone rang. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked, a car door slammed, the refrigerator hummed its monotonous song. I could hear my own heartbeat, slightly too fast, like I'd been running, even though I'd been standing still. James and Emily. I tried the name out loud, just to hear it. Emily, soft, common. The kind of name that could belong to anyone, a coworker, a cousin, a stranger in a coffee shop who smiled too long. It didn't sound threatening. It sounded like someone who baked bread on Sundays and wore cardigans and had a laugh that made people lean closer. I told myself it was a mistake. Spas mixed up names all the time. Someone had transposed a file, copied the wrong information, attached the wrong credit card to the wrong appointment. These things happened. Systems failed. People were careless, but I didn't believe it. I went upstairs to my office and opened my laptop. My hands were shaking, just slightly, just enough that I had to retype my password twice. I pulled up James's email. We'd shared passwords years ago, back when that felt like intimacy instead of surveillance. He'd never changed his, or if he hadn't told me. I typed Azure Day Spa into the search bar. 3 results. The first was from 6 months ago. A confirmation email for a couples massage, 60 minutes Swedish, scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. The names listed, James and Emily, paid in full. The second was from 4 months ago. Hot stone massage, 90 minutes. James and Emily, paid in full. The third was from 2 months ago. Aromatherapy and deep tissue. James and Emily, paid in full. I clicked through each one, same spa, same credit card. Different dates. All Saturdays, all while I thought he was working or running errands or meeting his brother for lunch. Each email thanked him for choosing Azure Day Spa and invited him to explore their other services. Facials, body wraps, couples packages. I printed them. I don't know why. Maybe because seeing them on paper would make them real in a way pixels couldn't. The printer wheezed to life, spitting out pages that smelled like toner and betrayal, and I stacked them neatly on my desk like evidence for a trial that hadn't been scheduled yet. Then I went back to the search bar and typed Emily. 214 results. I didn't read them all at once. I couldn't. Each email was a small incision, precise and clean, the kind that doesn't hurt until later when you notice the blood. There were dinner reservations, concert tickets, a weekend in Charleston, booked under both their names, 2 rooms but adjoining, the kind of detail that lets you lie to yourself about what adjoining means. There were emails about wine tastings and art gallery openings and a cooking class where they'd learn to make risotto. There were messages, too, not many, but enough. Short and careful, the language of people who knew they were leaving evidence. Can't wait for Saturday. Thinking about you. Last night was perfect. They called each other by name, James, Emily, like naming each other made it more real, more solid. Something that could exist outside the pixels and passwords. I learned things about her. She worked in marketing. She had a sister in Portland. She liked old movies, the kind in black and white where people spoke in sharp, clever sentences. She sent him articles about restaurants and asked his opinion on books I'd never heard him mention. She used emojis, hearts and wine glasses and little suns, and he sent them back, which shocked me more than anything else because James didn't use emojis. Had once told me they were juvenile. A crutch for people who couldn't express themselves with words. But apparently, he used them for her. I sat in my office as the afternoon bled into evening, scrolling through a history I hadn't known existed. Outside, the light changed from gold to gray to the deep blue that comes before dark. I didn't turn on a lamp. I let the screen illuminate my face, harsh and cold, while I read about a version of my husband I'd never met. One who planned surprises and remembered details and made reservations at places I'd never heard of. The house settled around me. Pipes groaned, the heater clicked on. Somewhere downstairs, the clock kept ticking, faithful and stupid, counting seconds that no longer added up to anything I recognized. James came home at 6:30, exactly on time, exactly as always. I heard his key in the lock, the familiar rhythm of metal finding metal, then the door opening and closing with the soft thud that meant home to both of us, or used to. I heard him set down his bag, heard him walk to the kitchen, heard the refrigerator open. "Sarah," he called up the stairs. "You home?" I didn't answer right away. I sat in the dark of my office, my laptop still open in front of me, the blue light painting my hands ghost pale. I could hear him moving below me, opening cabinets, running water. The sounds of someone who believed everything was still fine, still fixable, still safe. "Yeah," I finally called back. My voice sounded normal. I was surprised by that. "I'll be down in a minute." I closed the laptop. I stood. I walked down the stair one at a time, my hand on the railing, my body moving through space the way it always did. as if nothing had changed, as if the house itself hadn't shifted on its foundation, while I'd been reading emails meant for someone else. He was in the kitchen, still in his work clothes, tie loosened but not removed, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He smiled when he saw me, automatic, reflexive, the smile of someone who'd smiled at me 10,000 times before. "Hey," he said. "How was your day?" "The spa called," I said. His smile didn't falter, not yet. "Oh yeah? About the massage?" They wanted to confirm the appointment for James and Emily. Now it changed. Not disappeared. James had never been the kind of person whose face betrayed him easily, but shifted, the way light shifts when a cloud passes over the sun. Something in his eyes recalibrated. "That's weird," he said. He turned back to the counter, where he'd been slicing an apple. The knife moved in steady strokes. "Must be a mix-up. I'll call them tomorrow and sort it out." "I already looked it up," I said. "That's not the first time you've booked a massage with her." The knife stopped. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It didn't crack like thunder or shatter like glass. It simply expanded, filling the kitchen, pressing against the walls, seeping into the spaces between us until there was nothing else. Just the silence and the two of us standing on opposite sides of it. "Sarah," he said. He put the knife down, carefully, like it mattered where it went, like precision could save him. "I can explain." "Then explain." He turned to face me, and for the first time in 10 years, I looked at him and didn't recognize what I saw. Or maybe I did, and that was worse. "She's a friend," he said. "A colleague. We've gone to the spa a few times after stressful projects. It's not what you think." "What do I think?" "Sarah, you've been taking her to the spa for 6 months," I said. My voice was calm. I was proud of that. "You've been to Charleston together. You send each other messages about wine and movies and last night being perfect. So tell me what I think, James, because I'd love to know." He leaned back against the counter. His hands gripped the edge, knuckles white. He looked tired suddenly, older, like the lie he'd been carrying had weight and he'd finally set it down. "It started at a work conference," he said. "Last summer, we had dinner a few times. It was just talking. I swear, Sarah, it was just talking. And then it wasn't." He looked at the floor. "I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out sharp and bitter, a sound I'd never made before. "No one ever does." "I was going to end it," he said, looking up now, his eyes searching mine for something I no longer had to give. "I swear I was. After your birthday. I was going to stop. After you took her to the spa one more time." He flinched. "It's not like that." "Then what's it like?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, this man I'd built a life with, this stranger who used emojis for someone named Emily, and I realized I didn't need him to answer. I already knew. I'd known the moment the spa called, maybe even before that. Some animal part of me had been waiting for this, had sensed the fault line forming beneath us, had felt the ground preparing to split. "Does she know about me?" I asked. "Yes." "Does she know you were planning to end it?" A pause. "No." I nodded. I felt very calm, very clear, like I'd been underwater for months and had finally surfaced. "Get out," I said. "Sarah, get out of this house. We need to talk about this." We just did. I walked past him, so close I could smell his cologne, that expensive stuff he'd started wearing last fall, and I wondered if Emily had picked it out. I went to the front door and opened it. Cold February air rushed in, sharp and clean. "You can come back tomorrow for your things. Tonight, you leave." He stared at me from the kitchen doorway. I saw him calculating, weighing his options, trying to decide if this was a wound he could bandage or if it was already too late. I watched him realize it was the latter. He grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door, the ceramic bowl we'd bought in Mexico on our honeymoon, painted with flowers and birds and symbols we'd been told meant joy. He stopped next to me. I could feel the heat coming off his body, familiar and foreign all at once. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know," I said, and I closed the door. The house sounded different after he left. Bigger, emptier. The heater still clicked on and off. The refrigerator still hummed. But there was space now, vast and echoless, where another person's breathing used to be. I walked through the rooms like a stranger, touring a museum. Here was the couch where we'd sat every Friday, him on the left, me on the right, our bodies knowing their places without being told. Here was the dining table where we'd eaten 1,000 meals, where he'd proposed a toast on our 5th anniversary and I'd cried into my wine because I was so grateful, so sure we were the lucky ones. Here was the bedroom, the bed we'd shared, still unmade from that morning, his pillow dented where his head had been. His nightstand with a book he'd been reading, something about the history of data, dense and boring, the kind of thing he always said helped him fall asleep. His phone charger snaked across the surface, waiting for a phone that wouldn't come home tonight. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall and felt absolutely nothing, which scared me more than grief would have. I thought maybe I was in shock. I thought maybe this was what people meant when they said numb. But underneath the numbness was something else, something I didn't have a name for yet. A kind of recognition, like finding a photograph of yourself from years ago and finally understanding what you looked like to everyone else. I went back to my office. I printed more emails. I made a folder. I labeled it evidence, though I wasn't sure what I was gathering evidence for. Divorce? Understanding? Proof that I hadn't imagined this. I added the spa receipts, the dinner reservations, the messages where he told someone else she was beautiful, important, seen. I thought about Emily. I tried to picture her. Was she younger, funnier? Did she laugh at his jokes the way I used to, before I'd heard them all and could predict the punchlines? Did she think he was saving her from something, the way I used to think he'd saved me from the loneliness of my mid-20s, from the fear that I'd never find someone who chose me? I hoped she was happy. I hoped she had no idea what was coming, that this moment, this fracture, was just the beginning for her too. That one day she'd be sitting in her own house, reading her own emails, realizing that the man who called her beautiful also called someone else darling, because that's what men like James did. They found cracks in themselves and filled them with other people, then wondered why nothing ever felt solid. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe Emily was different. Maybe she was the one he'd been waiting for all along, and I was just the practice round, the rough draft, the person he had to outgrow before he could become whoever he was supposed to be. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house creak and settle, its old bones adjusting to new weight. And I thought about all the nights I'd lain here beside him, our bodies touching in the casual way of people who've stopped noticing touch, and wondered how many of those nights he'd been thinking about her. He came back the next day, as promised. I'd expected him to look different. Guilty, ashamed, diminished, somehow, but he looked like James. Same face, same walk, same way of jingling his keys when he was nervous. He brought boxes from his car and went upstairs without saying much. I stayed in the kitchen and listened to his footsteps overhead, the opening and closing of drawers, the soft thud of objects being placed into cardboard. He took his clothes, his books, his laptop, the electric razor I'd bought him for Christmas, the watch his father had given him. He left the furniture. We'd agreed on that through a brief, businesslike text exchange the night before, but took the photographs where he appeared alone, leaving behind the ones where we smiled together, coupled and complicit. When he came downstairs with the last box, he paused in the doorway. "I'll set up the bank transfer for my half of the mortgage," he said. "And we should probably talk to someone about everything. A lawyer? If that's what you want." "What do you want, James?" He shifted the box in his arms. "I want you to be okay." "I don't think that's how this works." "I know." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his face I couldn't name. Regret, maybe, or relief, or both at once. "For what it's worth, I did love you. I do love you. Just not enough." He didn't deny it. After he left, I stood in the living room and looked at the spaces where his things used to be. The bookshelf had gaps now, uneven and obvious. The mantel looked too empty. Even the air felt different, lighter, like the house was exhaling something it had been holding too long. I took down our wedding photo. I put it in a drawer. Then I went upstairs and changed the sheets, and for the first time in 10 years, I slept in the middle of the bed. The days after were strange. Not painful exactly, but disorienting. Like walking through a house where someone had moved all the furniture 6 inches to the left. Everything familiar but slightly wrong. I went to work. I answered emails. I had video calls where I nodded and smiled and pretended I was listening while my mind wandered to other things, like how I'd never noticed the way James cleared his throat before lying, or how I'd convinced myself that marriage was supposed to feel like this, quiet and stable and mostly numb. Friends reached out. Rachel called first. She'd heard from someone who'd heard from someone else, the way news spreads in neighborhoods where people wave from driveways. She offered to come over, to bring wine and ice cream and outrage on my behalf. I thanked her and said I was fine. She didn't believe me, but she respected the lie. My mother called next. She said all the things mothers say, that I was better off, that I deserved someone who appreciated me, that she'd never fully trusted James anyway, which was a revision of history so blatant I almost laughed. She asked if I wanted to come stay with her for a while. I said no. I needed to be here, in this house, learning how to exist in it alone. I found small things he'd left behind. A pair of socks in the dryer, a book shoved behind the nightstand, a note he'd written to himself on a post-it stuck inside the junk drawer. Call Mom, Thanksgiving. I threw the socks away. I kept the book. I stared at the note for a long time before crumpling it up and tossing it in the trash. I started noticing the house differently. The crack in the living room ceiling I'd stopped seeing years ago. The way the kitchen faucet dripped if you didn't turn it hard enough to the right. The spot on the carpet where he'd spilled red wine during our housewarming party. The stain we'd scrubbed until it faded to a shadow but never fully disappeared. I thought we were building something here. A life. A future. The kind of solid, unremarkable happiness that wasn't exciting but was real. I'd thought if we just kept showing up, kept paying the mortgage and mowing the lawn and pretending Friday night Thai food was intimacy, we'd eventually arrive somewhere worth arriving at. I didn't blame him. Not entirely. That was the strange part. I was angry, yes, furious in moments when I'd see a commercial for a spa or hear someone say the name Emily, but underneath the anger was something else. A recognition that we'd both been pretending, that I'd known, on some level, that we'd stopped reaching for each other years ago, that I'd accepted the distance because accepting it was easier than admitting we'd failed at the one thing we'd promised each other we'd be good at. Maybe Emily was just the person who finally named what we'd been avoiding. Maybe she'd done me a favor. Or maybe that was just what I told myself so I could sleep at night. I found the receipt on a Saturday, 2 weeks after he'd left. I was going through old mail, sorting things into piles, keep, shred, recycle, when I found it tucked inside a credit card statement from last October. Azure Day Spa, couples massage with champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries. Paid in full. October 14th, our anniversary. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at it. The date, the amount, the itemized list of services rendered. While I'd been home that night, waiting for him with dinner I'd spent all afternoon making, wearing the dress he said he liked, he'd been at the spa with her. He'd come home late. Something about a client emergency, he'd said, smelling like sandalwood and eucalyptus, and kissed me on the forehead and told me he was sorry. He'd make it up to me. I'd believed him. I'd believed him because I wanted to. Because the alternative was a kind of math I didn't want to do. Adding up the late nights and weekend work trips and times he'd looked at his phone and smiled at something I couldn't see. Because I'd built a life on the assumption that love was enough, that wanting it to work would make it work, that if I just tried harder, gave more, asked for less, we'd find our way back to each other. But we'd never been lost. We'd just been pretending to be found. I lit a candle that night, the good kind, the kind I only burned on special occasions, and I sat in the living room with a glass of wine and watched the flame flicker and dance. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been in this house. The newlywed who'd painted these walls yellow because yellow meant happiness. The woman who'd cried in the bathroom when the pregnancy test came back negative for the 3rd time. The wife who'd learned to sleep beside someone who dreamed about someone else. I thought about Emily, too. I wondered if she was happy tonight, if James was with her, if they were planning their future, picking out paint colors and discussing mortgage rates and promising each other it would be different this time, better, real. I hoped they were. Not because I forgave them, but because I understood. We were all just people trying to fill the spaces inside ourselves, trying to find someone who made us feel less alone. James had found that in her, and maybe, someday, I'd find it in someone who actually chose me. Or maybe I'd find it in myself. Maybe that was the point. The candle burned low, the house settled into its night sounds. I finished my wine and rinsed the glass and turned off the lights. I walked upstairs to the bedroom, my bedroom now, not ours, and got into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. And I slept, deeply, the way I hadn't slept in years. Spring came slowly. The trees outside my window budded, then bloomed, then filled with leaves that turned the light green and soft. I planted flowers in the front yard. Nothing fancy, just petunias and marigolds, things that didn't require much care. I liked getting my hands dirty. I liked the ritual of watering them each evening, watching them grow, knowing that my attention was enough to keep them alive. I didn't see James. We communicated through lawyers, through emails that were polite and cold, the language of people who used to know each other and were now just transaction partners. He moved out of state, new job, new city, new start. I heard through mutual friends that he and Emily were still together. I heard they'd gotten an apartment with a view. I heard she was pregnant. I deleted those friends from social media. The divorce was finalized in July. I signed the papers in my lawyer's office, my hand steady, my signature looking like it always had. When it was done, my lawyer shook my hand and said, "You're free now." I thanked her and walked out into the summer sun and felt nothing. Freedom, I'd learned, wasn't relief. It was just a different kind of weight. I kept the house. I couldn't afford it, not really, but I kept it anyway because selling it felt like admitting defeat, and I'd already admitted enough. I got a roommate, a quiet graduate student named Maya who worked nights and left her shoes by the door and never asked about the photographs I'd taken down or the wedding ring I no longer wore. We split the mortgage and the utilities and sometimes sat together on the back porch, drinking wine and not talking, and that was enough. I went back to the places James and I used to go. The coffee shop, the park, the Thai place we'd ordered from every Friday. I wanted to see if they still felt like ours or if time had reclaimed them. Mostly they felt like places, just places. The coffee was still good. The park still had ducks. The Thai food still came in the same containers with the same fortune cookies that said the same vague, hopeful things. One Saturday in August, I drove past Azure Day Spa. I didn't plan to. I was just running errands, taking the long way home, and there it was. Stone walls, essential oil diffusers visible through the windows, a sign that said Namaste in elegant script. I parked across the street and stared at it for a long time. I tried to imagine them inside. James and Emily lying on massage tables, eyes closed, hands touching across the space between them. I tried to feel angry or jealous or betrayed, but all I felt was tired. Tired of carrying the story, tired of being the person it had happened to, tired of the weight of knowing how ordinary it all was. How many women had sat in cars like mine, staring at places like this, realizing that the life they'd thought they were living had been fiction all along. I drove home. I made dinner. I ate it on the couch while watching a show I didn't care about. Maya came home late, and we exchanged small, friendly hellos. I went upstairs and took a long bath and thought about nothing. And later, in bed, in the dark, in the house that was slowly becoming mine, I realized something. I'd stopped waiting for him to call. I'd stopped checking his social media. I'd stopped writing angry letters I'd never send. I'd stopped telling the story to people who asked what happened, stopped performing the role of the wronged wife, stopped trying to make sense of a thing that was never going to make sense. I'd stopped. And in the stopping, something else had begun. It's been 2 years now. I still live in the house. Maya moved out last spring, and I got another roommate, then decided I liked living alone. I teach yoga twice a week at the community center. I started painting again, something I'd done in college and abandoned when real life got in the way. I'm not very good, but I'm getting better, and that's enough. Sometimes I see couples in grocery stores or restaurants and watch the way they move around each other, the casual choreography of people who've learned each other's rhythms. Sometimes it makes me sad. Sometimes it makes me grateful. Mostly it makes me wonder which ones are happy and which ones are just waiting for a phone call that will change everything. I don't think about James often anymore. When I do, it's less about him and more about what he represented, the version of myself who believed that love was supposed to hurt a little, that sacrifice meant settling, that marriage was about endurance rather than joy. That version of me feels like someone I used to know. I'm not angry at her. I just don't recognize her anymore. I'm dating someone now. His name is Marco. He teaches history at the high school and has a laugh that sounds like it comes from somewhere deep and genuine. He knows about James. I told him on our third date, not because I wanted to, but because I thought he deserved to know why I flinched when he tried to hold my hand. why I asked too many questions, why I needed things said clearly rather than implied. He listened. He didn't try to fix it. He just said, "Thank you for telling me." And we kept walking, and his hand found mine, and I let it stay there. I don't know if this will last. I don't know if anything lasts. But I know that when he says my name, he means me. Sarah, the woman sitting across from him, the woman who burns too many candles and laughs at bad jokes and sometimes cries for no reason she can name. Not some version he wishes I was. Not some future he's invented in his head. Just me. And that feels like something. The house is different now. I repainted the bedroom, a soft gray blue that changes with the light. I replaced the couch. I got rid of the coffee table book about Iceland and filled the shelf with books I actually want to read. The clock with the blue face still ticks above the stove. The crack in the living room ceiling is still there. The carpet stain from the wine has faded to almost nothing, just a shadow you'd only notice if you knew to look. I know to look. I know all the places this house holds memory, all the ways it remembers what I've tried to forget. But I'm learning to live with that, to let the past be present without letting it be everything. To understand that what happened wasn't fair and wasn't kind, but also wasn't the end. Some nights, when I can't sleep, I go downstairs and stand in the kitchen where it all came apart. I listen to the refrigerator hum. I watch steam rise from my tea. I think about the woman on the phone with the honey voice who thanked me for rescheduling under someone else's name. I think about how one small truth became 1,000 small truths, each one peeling away another layer until there was nothing left but foundation. Cracked and unsteady, but mine. I think about how love doesn't end with a scream. It ends with a phone call. And then it ends again, slowly. In all the small moments after, the empty drawer, the single coffee cup, the silence that used to be company. It ends every time you tell the story and realize you're not angry anymore. It ends when you finally stop reaching for the person who isn't there. And then, one morning, you wake up and realize you've been awake for hours and you didn't once think about him. That's how it really ends. Not with revelation, not with closure, not with the clean satisfaction of answers that make sense. It ends with the quiet recognition that you've survived something you didn't think you would. And maybe, just maybe, that survival is its own kind of love.